exists. Oh, perfect. Got it. All right. Some of the work that we do really kind of exists at the intersection of um, arts and artists and the nonprofit world. I think that that is a connection that is I'm really excited to dive into a little bit. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm going to share with you today, in kind of this setting the stage type introduction, is grounded in some of my personal experiences working with artists, as an artist working in a nonprofit, and then also as a nonprofit admin person, working with artists. So I've had the kind of the unique experience of working from both sides. And then, of course, my co-panelists have really interesting, unique experiences as well. So I think we're hopefully going to be able to bring a bit of a well-rounded picture for you with this. So relationships between nonprofits and artists can be really powerful and really transformational, but they can also be extractive if they're not intentional. And so I wanted to offer some principles and questions that I hope can guide the partnerships between nonprofits and artists, toward care, reciprocity, and accountability, which I thought, look at, I was when Colleen was talking about the introduction and the land acknowledgements, I was like, oh boy, we're on point with this today. So that's great. Um, so yeah, I think I've kind of already, yeah, we're looking at building relationships and partnerships with artists that are grounded in respect, reciprocity, and accountability. And for me, there's a few really kind of mm, easy and fairly straightforward things that can help ensure that you're building partnerships in this way. And the first of this is something, again, simple but critical, and that is contracts. So, contracts or care. Um, a written agreement is a basic sign of respect, and it shows that the work is real, valued, and protected. And a few things that contracts should really make sure to include are a clear scope of the work, uh, timelines and deadlines, payment terms, who has the rights to the work created in the project, cancellation and contingencies, and a clear point for communication for or a contact person for the artists. And importantly, artists should be encouraged to ask questions about contracts or propose changes. And if a contract feels non-negotiable, I think that that is a red flag. So just really open communication in the contract process. Um, when we skip contracts or we treat them as formalities, we're not just being kind of disorganized, we're really removing a layer of safety and professionalism that every artist deserves. So kind of going along the same lines as contracts, the kind of next thing is paying artists fairly. And so um, exposure is not payment, and a love for one's craft or one's art form should never be exploited. Using fee schedules, there's a few out there. Some of them are, there's nothing incredibly comprehensive that goes across different mediums and different uh, you know, types of art. CARFAC, Canadian Artist Representation, they have a fee schedule that's used for visual artists, and a lot of people setting fees within the arts world look to that CARFAC fee schedule as kind of a minimum baseline standard to be able to pay artists, even across disciplines. And so that can be a good resource to take a look at if you're looking at figuring out how much to fairly pay an artist. You just have to look at things like prep time, travel, materials, emotional labor, and the unique expertise that artists bring. And I think this is especially important when they're being asked to represent communities or lived experiences. And so I'll just give like a quick example of one of the artists' contracts that we recently engaged in at our Arts for Change conference in April, was that we had in our contract with we engaged artists as a part of the conference. They were encouraged to share some of their work throughout the conference in the day, and then they were engaged in a panel discussion. So not only did we compensate them for their performance or their actual engagement as artists, and also in the panel discussion, we also accounted for their prep time in that, and paid them I think a full day fee to be able to have the time and the space to really work on uh, making sure that they were bringing what they wanted and could in a really good way to our conference. So that's definitely one thing. Like, uh, if your organization has a budget for consultants and guest speakers and strategic advisors, then artists deserve the same respect and rate. And, let's be real, we're working in a nonprofit environment. And when budgets are tight, name it transparently and offer what you can, whether that's an honorarium, a resource, or something else of value. I think transparency and authenticity are very important, and never ever just assume that someone can do it for free. Um, so the other thing to think about when kind of embarking on a partnership with an artist is asking, do our values align? Are both parties clear on the purpose of the work that we're setting out to do? And are we inviting them into a real collaboration or a predetermined plan? And this is something that I think, even for myself, there's still some learning to do. I think, it's a lot easier said than done to incorporate artists into a true collaboration with your organization, especially if they're kind of coming into it. But I think it's a really good thing to keep in the back of your mind as you're developing ideas and connections is what's a real collaboration versus predetermined plan. Good partnerships are built on shared understanding and mutual investment, and definitely not just one party like using another to achieve a goal. And so, a quick way to kind of give yourself a check on this would be, could both parties confidently say why this partnership is happening and what they're getting out of it? Um, Again, kind of a straightforward question, but sometimes it could be easier. It could be harder to answer than you might think. If an excuse me, if an artist doesn't know your mission or your team doesn't know why the artist was chosen, it's time to kind of like pause and maybe revisit if it's a good alignment. Oh, skipped ahead there. So this is a hard one, but I think it needs to be said. Too often, artists, especially those who are Indigenous, racialized, 2S LGBTQ plus, or disabled, are invited into spaces to represent without real influence, support, or context. And so I think there's some questions you can kind of ask yourself if to kind of assess if you're tokenizing someone. Are we inviting this person because of their identity, their expertise, or both? Have they been consulted on how they want to be involved? Do they have decision-making power? And are they, excuse me, are they being asked to take on risk or emotional support or emotional labor without support? And so I think this is a tough one, and I think this is again another area where there's learning to be done, even for myself as an arts administrator and organizer of events and artist partnerships. It's definitely not as self-evident, especially when bringing people in on a contract basis or a one-time basis, really kind of trying to build authentic relationships. And so that's kind of the next step of things. So tokenism often looks like isolation, one person at a table or in a room, and they're expected to carry the voice of many. And true inclusion looks like relationships and not transactions. It looks like listening, adapting, and being willing to change course based on what you hear. I think that's an important part of it is listening and being flexible and open to hearing different ideas or even criticism. Um, so just to wrap this up, to partner well with artists, nonprofits need to slow down, listen deeply, and treat artists not just as collaborators, but as co-creators of meaning and change. And this takes effort, but it also leads to stronger projects, better outcomes, and more justice in communities. So, as you go forward in this journey of building collaborations and relationships with artists, keep asking, are we building partnerships that are fair, that are grounded in consent and care, and that reflect the values we claim to hold? And so I'm gonna stop myself there, and we can move on. I'm really excited for the rest of the panel and to hear from everybody else.
Thanks, Em. That was a really perfect way to start us off. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise on this topic, as well as your leadership of Sask Arts Alliance and kind of ensuring that value alignment and creative support and recognition for artists in Saskatchewan. So thank you for that. So I think next we can move on to sharing stories. So Lindsay or Crystal, I don't know who wants to kick us off. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but again, we're really looking forward to hearing from both of you. So Lindsay, you're first on my screen. Do you wanna start us off?
Sure. Yeah. I'm wondering if I can share my screen too. Oh yeah, okay, I can.
If not, I'll just make you. Oh, you got it. Perfect.
I got it. Yeah, I got it here. So, yeah, as you can see my screen, I was asked to be a part of a really incredible project called Digital Matriarchs in the Yukon. I started it when I lived in the Yukon, and then I moved to Regina, and I was here, and then I flew back a couple times to get it finished. The project is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm always really excited to talk about it. It took us 2 years from start to finish, and we started here with this little graphic. It's in partnership with the Indigenous Women and ICTs, so that's supporting and empowering Indigenous women in with technology. This project was completed across 3 sister sites. I think at the beginning I said 4, so I got that number wrong. But there was a project in Bolivia, Ecuador, and in the Yukon. So it was really unique to kind of understand how this project was similar and different in the different countries. And together, like, we used an advisory council, and we focused the project on key areas that digital technologies could support: health and wellness, community safety, and financial independence. And yes, this project is geared towards matriarchs, towards Indigenous women, but it is not gender conformed. It is available and open to anybody who wants to increase their digital technology skills, which was the focus of the project. So the broad question participants engaged in was: how can digital technology support and amplify the voices of Indigenous women and non-binary people in the public sphere? And when we think about that, we're not often thinking about art or artists or how that fits in together. And I was one of the very first, like, before I officially jumped on this project, I was one of the first interviewees. So when Nicole Schaffenecker, who was the project lead, when we started talking, she asked me about how I started my business, how I, did this and that. And it was literally just like one step at a time. I had no clue what I was doing, none whatsoever. Even to the point where, like, I'm still struggling with, like, my business taxes. Like, it is really a big thing to take on when you have ADHD and undiagnosed autism, you're Indigenous, you have, all this trauma, you're a single mom. And classic, like, the women are always the caretakers. There's always something going on for us that we need to pay attention to. So we did some one-on-one interviews, and then we started holding community conversations and consultations in different communities in the North to identify, what they were needing and looking for in terms of digital technology. The main question that we asked is what is already working and what else needs for digital technologies to support the health and wellness, community safety, and financial independence of Indigenous and Indigenous women and non-binary people in the Yukon. At first, we focused on safety, but then as we started talking, it seemed really important that we focus on financial independence and creating independence for people and a way for people to learn how to kind of do what I did, starting from the ground up. And then we found so based on what we heard and along with our advisory council, we created the Digital Matriarchs Northern Pathways Project, a mentorship opportunity by and for Indigenous women and non-binary people to share digital skills with each other to support financial independence. And in turn, health and wellness and community safety. We really had a view of how those things are connected, but how financial independence is at the top. Another thing that I should mention here is that we really focused on like the rural communities and not so much like the urban center, which is Whitehorse, the capital city of the Yukon. And we wanted to amplify Indigenous voices in digital spaces and the global public sphere, which is how this website came to be. So that is the project story. There's like all this really cool stuff. This project is unique because it's grassroots, it's do it yourself, and it has an open source approach to sharing digital skills. So I'm just going to show a bit of that. I just want to make sure that you can see when my screen is changing. Is it good? Okay. It's been a long time since I shared this on Zoom. So as you can see, we have different streams here. We have documentary filmmaking, building an online business, making a podcast, building a website, and photography and filmmaking. What I want to say about this is one of the most incredible projects that I have ever been a part of. And it is because of the way that it was done. It was very personable. We put out a call for participants, for people who wanted to build their skills or were curious about digital technology and what their interest in art was. So here we have, it doesn't have a list of all of us, but the documentary filmmaking, for example, if it loads, yeah. So here, our mentee was Gukchish Logan Law, and her mentor was Naomi Mark of Midnight Light. So what we did is we teamed up professionals with our mentees. We talked about our mentorship style, what the project concept was going to be about. So Logan's concept was making a short documentary film with a Taku River Tlingit elder. That project was completed. They talk about why this project, there's short interviews with them. It is such an interactive website that doesn't just end here. It doesn't just end with these pathways, and here's the finished project. I'm not going to play it because it'll take some time. But I'll go into mine. I did make a podcast because I have a background in media. My mentee was Amy Charlie. She is the executive director of Ada Woman in Inuvik and Caribou Heart Designs in Watson Lake. And we did the concept of developing a podcast based on conversations with changemakers in the North. And, there's all this really cool information, but one of the most awesome things about Digital Matriarchs are the learning pathways. So the learning pathways create a step-by-step opportunity for people to do the same thing that Amy did with me, but not directly with me. And if they do want to do it directly with me, there's this option in this website that you can reach out to me. We have resources used, tips, tricks, and advice, making a podcast. And then at the bottom, we have this little comment thing. As you can see, Joelle Hogan of the Yukon Soaps Company left a message and said, "Can't wait to listen to the podcast." And this is an area where people can ask questions, you know, they can look for more information, they can contact me directly and say, hey, it's really cool what you did, can you help me? And then we would go through like the consultation, as well as my rates for consultation, or they can just use the resources here. Another really amazing thing about this website, which ties into the networking and you know, community services and things like that, is this resource page. These resources are mainly in the Yukon and Northwest Territories that we've come across that can support people who want to develop a digital skill like filmmaking or podcasting or online entrepreneurship. And you know, clearly, like, this list is always going to change, but it is done in the perfect way. So we have education and training. We have opportunities, you know, for funding sources right here. So if somebody has a project they want to do, you know, they've come visit our website, they can look and see what funding opportunities would be relevant and accessible to them, and platforms to share their work. You know, we have the Available Light Film Festival, we have the Dawson City International Film Festival, the Klondike Institute of Art and Culture, Digital Theater Collective, Western Arctic Moving, you know, there's just all this amazing stuff. And then also equipment rental. Where do you need to, where can you borrow equipment to complete your project? Also just something that just like blew me away. Like when I was learning about the things that were actually available to artists that not many people knew about, it just made me so happy, because as a person who is from a very small town of 600 people, I didn't grow up with access to education. I didn't grow up with access to knowledge. I had to go out and actively search and network and find it myself. And then here's some, you know, individuals, businesses, and organizations that are using digital technologies in innovative ways to uplift Indigenous voices in the North and beyond. As you can see, there are so many. There are so many organizations out there that are willing to work with Indigenous artists to increase their revenue, to help get their projects and their business out there. And then here is basically our credits. Our website consultant and website artwork was done by Heather von Steinhagen, who is a Cree artist from Regina here. The project lead for the North was Nicole Schaffenecker, who also has ties to Saskatchewan as well. And then there's me. I was the project liaison. That was decided after the first interview that I did with Nicole. And she was like, this is amazing what you have done for yourself as an artist. And then this whole program was just kind of built from that very first conversation that we had. And then, of course, the lead researcher, Dr. Pascal Lupin, Department of Political Science at Brock University. And then, of course, all the other, you know, advisory members, the mentors, mentees, and research contributors. And that's one thing that I want to say about funding. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen right now. Thank you for putting that in the chat, the link to the website. Again, it is just incredibly done. I really hope that, you know, we can work with rural artists here to bring that project here, to provide an incredible resource for artists that are working with nonprofits, that are building their own business, that are looking to increase their skills, that are looking to work from home, because that's what I do. And, you know, I'm just so proud of it. It's like a little baby. It was the biggest project that I ever worked on from start to finish, in terms of like a community connections kind of project. But also I just want to say, like, I didn't go to school for radio. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't go to school for radio. I applied for the job and I learned on the job. And I think that is one of the key takeaways from this project, is that this is a learn as you go. This is hands-on learning. This is one-on-one mentorship. And for a lot of our Indigenous women, a lot of our Indigenous communities, especially our rural communities who don't have access to university or even college, this is the way that it has to go. And it creates connections with people. And it's just like, it just like, I don't know, it just warms me so much, knowing that this project is still out there, it's still active. And we are currently working on funding. And the partnership that we had with Brock University, it funded because it was a research project. So advocacy in the arts is always something that people are going to want to know more about. And so if you're looking at a big project like that, you know, you want to reach out to different organizations like we had a list of organizations that are committed to uplifting Indigenous voices. You reach out to those programs, you reach out to the university researchers and be like, hey, we have this problem that we want to have solved, right? And it's not about you, it's about the community as a whole, right? And as soon as we take that focus off of us as individuals trying to make a living and we're trying to solve this big problem, universities are usually like, yeah, sure, we'll see what we got. So those partnerships are just so important. And that's really all I have to say about it. I know it was a lot. I can kind of go on but I'm just really happy to be here and to share that incredible project with you all. So Ganeshish for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing. And I'm thrilled to learn more about this project. So I'd like to just kind of open the floor, if you don't mind, to questions. And perhaps I can start us off because, and you did talk a little bit about this, but the partnerships that you developed that had that kind of added level of complexity because you also included university researchers, and you talked about, you know, the community-based and community-driven approach and the importance of the researcher following the lead of the experts in community. And just coming back to kind of some of the things that Em said at the beginning in their conversation about transparency and clarity on the work. And I think like when you bring a university researcher in with nonprofits and like local artists, that's like a very complex kind of puzzle, I suppose. So what were the things that you feel, or the kind of the foundational principles that really supported success in this project? Like Em talked about, you know, transparency or contracts or funding, or, you know, like what were the things, the pillars, I suppose, that you feel really set this project up for success?
It was the advisory council. For this project, we had an advisory council that was made up of a mixture of Indigenous and women, non-binary, Indigenous people, and business owners and artists who were able to identify the different challenges that we could be coming up against in terms of creating a project like this. They also helped us ensure that it was culturally appropriate as well, which was, you know, another thing. The whole idea behind the university being a part, like the program, it was presented to the Brock University research leads, and there was 3 of them, 4, including Nicole. And you know, they all liaised together, they all shared what they were doing. It was really back and forth, and like they were truly focused on uplifting Indigenous voices in the technology, in the tech world across the globe, you know. So it wasn't just us. So there were other people that were informing the process. And I'm not like, I can't say how they decided how much we were going to get paid or whatnot, but we were paid fairly. And I believe that it was based upon the CARFAC rates as well, which is something that was really important and that Nicole and the other research leads had advocated for. The end result of that is the product that you see and the effort that went into it. Because we were being paid well, we were able to focus, we were able to put that work in, and we were able to really take the time. We were given 3 months to complete the project, and we were paid for, you know, I think it was like 50 hours of mentorship time. So our mentee had more hours than the mentors, because they would come to us and they would check in with us. We would continue to guide them, and then we would give them homework, and then they would come back to us. So, you know, like we had a set amount of hours to support the artists, and through that set amount of hours, we were paid for that. If a project went longer, then, you know, the budget was a little bit flexible so that, you know, they had some extra funding left over and whatnot. But, you know, the main goal was to make sure that all the funding was used, that the project was done well, and that we also had the time to do it well. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, 100%. So like, and like connecting to what Em said, like fair compensation,
Yeah.
flexibility and recognition that the work isn't always like structured and perfect, that there are things that might change or evolve. So having that level of flexibility, because the nature of the work calls for it, and then just consideration for time that it takes to build this type of project, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So any other questions for Lindsay or comments? I always like to give a little time because sometimes
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
people just have something, but either way, we're gonna be on for a few more minutes, and yeah, an incredible project indeed. Yeah, the website is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing actually.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the partnerships that we created. It was with Mammoth. It's a media company in the Yukon, and they actually gave us a discount because of the project. And I think that is another thing too, is that those organizations that are looking to uplift voices are always wanting to support in some way, whether it's discounts, funding, providing services. It's just literally all about reaching out, right? Yeah. So goodness, geez, for that, appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. I really appreciate you sharing that wonderful project with us. And Crystal, I'd love to hear from you as well on some of your projects that you've worked on, or one, or however many you'd be willing to share and want to share. Yeah.
That sounds great. I don't have any slides or fancy things to share, but I'm just going to talk for a while. I'm actually going to, I think what sets me apart as a for-profit business is that I'm sort of in this social enterprise space where a lot of the work that I do while I'm running a business is based in values, very much like what we were talking about when Em had her slides up there. So much of my work that I do is values based for so many reasons. I think that I bring sort of a unique background to my work, and that's what frames it up. So I would say that my sort of main values that frame up the work that I do are respect, relationship, and responsibility, which coincidentally are the 3 R's that are rooted in Zare's work in restorative justice. So I've been studying restorative justice for, well, since 2006. So it's been a while, it's been a minute. I guess that puts me at 20 years now. So I've been in university for, it's 20 years, I guess now. I've been working through, I did my undergrad in sociology, and then I did my master's in justice studies. And then I moved it out to Vancouver and did my PhD in criminology with a focus on restorative justice. So I do come to business ownership as someone who has sort of a very socially justice mindset. Always sort of that concern for the greater good. I come to my academic work from a personal perspective in that when I was 11, my uncle was responsible for taking the life of Rena Burke in Victoria. You might be familiar with the series or the book Under the Bridge, which is based on my uncle's life and sort of involvement in the death of Rena Burke. And so because of that, it caused a lot of upset in my family. I was 11, grew up with my uncle, and then all of a sudden was not allowed to talk to him anymore because he was a monster, because he did this horrible thing, as framed by my family, the adults in my family who wanted to protect us and sort of save our innocence. But this ended up causing a lot of shame and trauma in myself and the other children in my family because of the secrets that were kept. And so as an adult who doesn't have children, a big part of what I believe in is sort of giving them autonomy and preparing them for things that are going to happen in their life. And I have this sort of backstory also of growing up in the arts. So my grandmother owned Olive Ceramics in Weyburn in the 70s, 80s, 90s. She was a female entrepreneur in a time when there wasn't probably a lot of female entrepreneurs. And then my mom and dad took it over in the 90s and 2000s before letting the business go in 2003 after my parents' divorce. And of course, I was like, 16 years old. I was like, I don't want anything. I'm not taking over ceramic business when I'm 16. In fact, I want nothing to do with anything about what's going on in this family. So I went to university for 100 years and then got to a point where that became very isolating and very hard to sit and be alone and do that type of work. And so I realized that I needed to turn back to something that made me happy, which was the arts. And so when the pandemic hit, I sort of returned to my roots and removed myself from that academic space and decided to do something that would make me happy. And I think that a lot of my understandings around trauma have led me to this point where a lot of what I do isn't about working through trauma necessarily as much as trying to teach ourselves new ways to make room for joy. Because if we can have greater capacity for joy when times of trauma happen, we have a better toolkit already built to be able to approach that and to address the things that sort of happen to and around us on a daily basis. Because part of being a human being is that we are constantly always bumping up against something, whether that be another person or a situation that we find frustrating or an institution that we feel oppressed by. There's just so many different things that are going to happen to us in our lives. And if we have those tools to be able to create capacity for joy in our lives, we're better equipped to be able to address those things when they happen. So I don't just own a business in the sense that a lot of people just own a business and they order stock and they run a till and they do their books and they, all that sort of stuff. I think that those things all sort of are not really of great interest to me. Which, like Lindsay, I also have struggled through the taxes and everything else that comes with business ownership, like registering your business. And last year I had my partnership dissolved, so then had to completely close the business and then reopen the business. And my books are a mess because of it. Anyways, that's besides the point. So what sort of sets me apart as an artist is that I come with not just a desire to make money, but a desire to make a change. And I think that a lot of artists probably come to their work with those same desires and those same sort of wishes to be able to help people in some way, shape, or form. Also, a lot of trauma around my own personal background in that my mom was part of the 60s scoop. So we lost all of our culture and traditions and any link to our family and our ancestors when my mom was taken forcibly from her mom in the hospital room when she was a baby. And my mom didn't really find out much about what her background was until she turned 50 and got her adoption papers from my aunt at the time when my grandmother, who my mom felt very loyal to, went to a nursing home and then was able to access records that allowed her to sort of start to dig into and understand who she was, especially growing up in a home where she was taught every time that you go to Regina, if you see an Indigenous person, you need to run and scream and like go away because they're dangerous. And, that sort of like rhetoric that a lot of people sort of were socialized to believe for whatever reason. And so really trying actively now to reconnect with my own roots. And so there's a lot of social justice that goes into all the work that I do. And that's why I'm telling you all of this sort of backstory. Some interesting partnerships that I've done. I have a lot of different partnerships right now. A lot of it is I piecemeal work together, which I'm sure that Lindsay can understand too, because we're both, hustlers and contractors and trying to always find that next dollar and where's it going to come from and how do I pay to keep the lights on in the building that I'm renting. So I have a lot of different contracts. I work with, right now, I guess one of my longest running partnerships is with Tattagwa View Extended Care Homes. So I go in once a week and I work with folks who live as residents in the extended care home and bring them different art projects, or they come here and see me at my studio, which is probably their favorite because it gets them out of their same environment that they're in for majority of their time. We get to play old music and they get to sort of relive some of their younger years. I hear a lot of comments like, it's so nice to be able to know that I can still do something for myself with my own two hands, because they're not really given a lot of autonomy in a care home. A lot of things are done for them, including like the cooking and the cleaning and the, dressing themselves and all that different stuff. And for them to be able to sit down and take autonomy over the creation of an object is really empowering for a lot of people. I also work with a lot of libraries. So I'll have a lot of libraries reach out and ask me to come in and do programming, especially that are closer to reserve spaces where there's a lot of youth that might be harming. For example, in one library that I went to, they had 19 suicide attempts in their bathroom in 1 month. And we come in and we talk about sort of these ideas about like that, you know, we all have traumas and that we've all seen things and been through things and maybe even done things ourselves, because we all have the capacity to be both someone who is harmed, but also someone who causes harm to other people. And just being able to sort of talk about respect and relationship and responsibility in that capacity while we're making something allows people to focus their attention on a task in front of them and the process of creation, while also listening and honoring sort of the different roles that they play in their daily lives, whether that be someone who harms or causes harm. And that changes from day to day. We all have that capacity, every single one of us. Which is why so much of my sort of compassion and empathy is drawn from my experience of having my uncle who has taken somebody's life before. And just those lessons of knowing that we all have the capacity to do bad things, but that any one thing that we do is not who we are. And so sharing a lot of those messages with youth in libraries, with even with people in the nursing home who maybe are at the later stages of their lives, but still have lots of capacity to be able to reflect on who they are and where they've been and what they've been through and the different things that they've done, good, bad, or ugly. I'm really excited. I'm working on a partnership with Envision Counseling right now, and we are developing an experiential play-based learning through arts program where young people ages like 10 to 14, sort of that age where you think everyone in the world is looking at you and you're scared to go into a store and have to buy your first bra or your tampons for the first time. Or like me, the 50th time, and I made my mom buy them for me until I was 18 years old. And then she's like, well, you don't live here anymore, so I'm not driving them to your house. But all these different things, like when you walk out of the gym after volleyball practice and you see Tatiana and London talking at their lockers and they're whispering, and all of a sudden they stop when you come by. Well, what are you thinking if you're Tatiana or London? And what are you thinking if you're Jolene, right? Like, what are those different thought processes and what sort of assumptions are you making about that situation? And then how can we make a piece of art that reflects how we might be feeling in that moment, and using that artifact to then travel further so that we can then use that artifact when I'm sitting in my room and I just had that experience to look at it and think, oh, we talked about this. And maybe there's something that I can do to sort of navigate through this situation on my own. And if I can't, I also know that I have, some safe adults in the community who I might be able to just pop by the studio or just pop into Envision and say, hey, this thing happened and I need some help. I just need to talk through it and see if like, am I just making this up in my head, or is this something that's really going on? And so, yeah, just using, I guess, a like juncture of all of my different like experiences and skill bases to reach out. I don't really reach out to a lot of people. I mostly have organizations reach out to me, but I think that's because I'm in my third year of business. I've been leading based on that respect, relationship, and responsibility value set, as well as inclusivity and compassion and understanding and listening for the sake of listening, as opposed to listening to respond. So I really built my business around those values. And I think that that's why I have people reaching out to me to look to partnership for different projects and programs. I don't know if I really answered the question or not, or if I really shared anything valuable, but that's who I am and what I do. And there we are.
No, absolutely. Very, very valuable and very important as well. And I think the values-led work, I think, really resonates with what I think all of our speakers have said so far. So establishing those values and those priorities and then allowing those values to lead the work seems to be a really important part of partnerships in general, but particularly around partnerships when we're dealing with really challenging social, cultural, historical events that are very heavy to navigate. But perhaps that's the beauty of partnership with artists, right? Is that it allows it, as Chrisley said, when you have a piece of art, or you can develop something or create something, I should say, that helps you work through and understand and give voice to that experience in a unique and in a different way. I think that's really the powerful part of it, right? So thank you very much for sharing. And I'd like to open it up again to the floor if anyone has any questions or comments. And if not, then I just have a few questions to kind of guide the end of our discussion, and I'd welcome anyone to jump in, but I see like one question that I have is we have nonprofits here that work in food security, work transitions, like, you know, that really encompasses life transitions, disability justice. So though thinking about those nonprofit organizations who may or may not have had partnerships with local artists, what would be kind of like the practical first steps for an organization to like contact? Like I think like perhaps we know that this is important, but like so many things in life, it's like, how do we begin? Like where do we start? Who do we talk to? Like and perhaps like from Sask Arts Alliance lens, like what are the services and supports that, you know, that can be in place to support organizations or individuals in our communities that might want to start that partnership or advocacy process?
Yeah, I can definitely start that off, and then I'm happy to kind of see what Lindsay and Crystal have to add to that too. But I think from my perspective, one of the ways to kind of get that started is to take the time to start building an authentic relationship with the person that you're interested in working with. So, you know, take them out for coffee, take get to know them, get to know, and I think it's again a part about what I kind of talked about in the beginning, like having that alignment, like, are you going to be able to work together well? Um, I think that's probably one of the biggest things is building an authentic understanding just interpersonally. And I think that applies to many different relationships in my work and my life. Anything that kind of um is good or has grown into something meaningful and authentic really evolves from that space of getting to know one another in a real way. So I think that is for me kind of the key thing. I'm yeah, happy to see what you.
I would agree. I think that um, becoming involved sort of in the art scene, whatever that looks like, whether that's just like going to shows or maybe it's finding places that artists gather and, you know, going to those spaces, going out for dinner at a restaurant that you maybe don't usually go to just so that you can hear an artist talk or see an artist show. And kind of like knowing what's going on in the arts scene so that you can see for yourself, because I think like you can get recommendations from other people, but they're not going to know exactly what it is that you're looking for just based on a brief conversation. And you're not really going to know what type of artist you're looking for unless you sort of have those conversations with other people. Like, are you looking for a filmmaker? Are you looking for a printmaker? Are you looking for a shoemaker? I don't know what you're looking for. But there's all sorts of there's different artistry that's happening in spaces all around us, whether some people are just working out of their homes, some people are, you know, running businesses, some people are somewhere in the middle of that, some people are showcasing their work in other people's stores. There's all sorts of different places to look for artistry. Online is a great space too, just like, you know, sort of looking for who are artists in my area and what kind of art do they do, and what, like, reading artist bios so you can kind of find out a little bit more about them. Are they values infused? Are they just, you know, are they a legacy artist? Are they this? Are they that? Like, what are you looking for? I guess kind of like getting your parameters set so that you know what you're looking for, so that when you find it, you know.
Yeah, I think definitely the most important thing is creating an awareness of what's happening in your community. We did that through conversations for digital matriarchs. One thing that I found just with myself is that I'll give you a really good example of, you know, utilizing artist spaces and how that can create partnerships that you wouldn't expect because you're going into a new space that you've never used. I was requested to do a voiceover for a short documentary, and you know, I have all my recording equipment with me, but I needed a room, and I found out that the RPL has the recording studio. So I went in there and you know, requested some time, brought my stuff in. The guy was like, oh, do you need some help? I'm like, no, I got this. And you know, just was like, I worked in radio for like 20 years, right? And like just dropping that little seed is super important, because you never know where opportunities are going to pop up when you're dropping those seeds around in the community. So I went and I recorded my stuff. I got out, and the first thing he did was give me a business card, and he said, I went upstairs and I talked to my boss, and they want you to call, because we want to, utilize your skills. I don't know. I honestly, to be honest, I never called because I'm too busy. So I still have the card. The opportunity will always be there. And another thing is too, is that when I was renting, when I had to move, I provide my LinkedIn as a reference, so people know that I'm not like this crazy person or whatever. They're gonna go check out my Facebook and see all my trash memes or whatever. I'm like, no, look at this page. And somebody emailed me back, and they're like, I'm so sorry, I rented the place, but I work with the Adult Autism Resource Center. Would you like to come in and do some programming with us? Again, it didn't work out because I'm too busy, but dropping those seeds everywhere, I have found the opportunities would come to me just through those small, short conversations about who I am, what I do. And I think that's really important. Once you become more comfortable and secure with yourself as an artist or community team player, then more people are going to be curious. And it's about creating that curiosity about what do you do and how can we, use what you do to make our community a better place. And that has been my experience all over the place, is just dropping seeds and word of mouth. And like, things aren't always coming to me because people know that I'm pretty busy, but they're always like, can we get your input on this? I used to be a director on the board for a theater in the Yukon. I'm a director on the board for Northern Native Broadcasting, of course, and with the Sask Arts Alliance. And it's really about putting yourself out there in an intentional way that aligns with your values. I didn't mention it, but I do a lot of work with values as well, in Indigenous storytelling and how that ties into who we are as Indigenous people and artists. And people are really interested, and they want to use our skills. And as long as the curiosity is there, then the opportunity will always become available.
I'm just gonna weigh in quickly and kind of like, I think both of the kind of avenues that Crystal and Lindsay took around like being involved in your community, and then also like I love the analogy of dropping the seeds. I think that, that works from an artist's perspective as well from an organizational perspective. Like once you start kind of putting the feelers out there as to who you are and what you're doing and what you'd like and you want to engage in that sort of thing, I think it's, there's a certain like it'll kind of tends to come back for sure.
It's kind of like making friends as a grown-up. Like all you have to do is go to the place that they're doing the thing that you love to do, and then that's your friends, right? Like that's your people.
Love this. And I think Autism Resource Center is actually on this call too. So here's your full circle moment, Lindsay. But in all seriousness, like I think and I hope that we can create a space as well in these calls, just because I know like the folks that come regularly to this Growing Nonprofit series, it's like, these are the folks that are showing up, that are at the community events, that are, actively engaged, knowing what nonprofit organizations are doing. But I think maybe this kind of helps lead into the other question that I wanted to ask, which comes up pretty much in all of our Growing Nonprofit series, because it's like, Em was here for one of Elder Lorna's teachings a few weeks ago and taking a call from Radio-Canada about the budget. And so it's like, arts-based budgets, it's a challenge. I think we could say Saskatchewan 100%, and then likely broadly. For nonprofit organizations, it can be very similar. So any advice, like I know we've talked about the importance of like payment and reciprocity and respect and time and all of those pieces, but like that can be challenging, I think, for a lot of nonprofit organizations that are fighting to keep the lights on as well, right? So I know this isn't like a straightforward answer, but I know that, like, for example, Em, you've had a lot of experience working with nonprofit organizations and just kind of, again, that broader arts-based advocacy. Lindsay and Crystal, I'm sure you've worked with many nonprofit organizations. So like, how did you kind of massage that to perhaps make it work so that the relationship and the funding kind of was manageable, I suppose, for all those parties. Do you want to start, Em?
Or,
Oh.
yeah. Lindsay, you go ahead. Yeah.
That's a challenging question. Like really challenging. I'm trying to think back to the time of, when I was paid fairly by a nonprofit. And it's pretty rare. I've found actually that I really like volunteering. So, I volunteered for one of the Food for Learning programs in the Yukon at the school I was working at, and, did some programming with them outside of school hours, because it was just something that I was passionate about, but also understanding that, when we do things like that, we are networking and creating other opportunities with people who are working with the people who have money, And so when they find out that someone like me is volunteering, then they can contact me and, look into something further that could be funded, and just kind of putting yourself out there what is that word? Like just being careful with your time, but also understanding that giving your time is important as well. It has to be a reciprocal relationship. If I'm expecting something from my community, I have to give back to my community. And I think that's a big part of it, and why funding or organizations that have funding tend to reach out. And I've been really grateful for that. I do volunteer a lot, and I really love that. I really love being a part of my community. And when people see that, they want that. They want you to be a part of whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I'll say too, like, I think that that's probably one of the most inherent challenges in working in the arts, working with artists, is that, the vast majority of things that we do and the things that happen are project based. And so it tends to be a multitude of things, the hunt over and over for money to do the thing, to engage the people, that sort of thing. And I think that's probably, across the board with nonprofits as well, not just in the arts. And so I think that that's always a challenge, is like, how do you kind of keep that going? Really practically, I think I would say, like, although they're limited, there are funding opportunities out there to engage artists in your communities. Like, there's funding programs through SaskArts, Artists in Communities. There's also funding available from SaskCulture for different kind of specific initiatives. And then I think and Crystal, you might be able, or whoever might be able to speak a little bit more to this, but I also do think that there's opportunities for funding, like maybe that are outside of the arts, to engage in, um, different types of learning opportunities. And again, yeah, maybe not exactly my wheelhouse, but I'm thinking of things like, community initiatives fund, or maybe there's some sort of health, wellness, or that sort of thing, to funding type opportunities that are less completely arts focused, and kind of using the arts to address other social issues and concerns. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but there are places, even though it's limited.
Yes. So for example, the grant that I work on, that we just started our year 2. So we reapplied and got the grant again, which is another thing, right? To say that once you sort of have received a grant once and have major deliverables, that you're a lot more of a likely candidate to be visited again for another grant funding. And I know it's hard to get that first one. Can be very challenging. Grant writing is very difficult. I do know that my university, Simon Fraser University, as well as I'm still on the mail list for U of R, they sometimes offer grant writing workshops. And that could definitely be something that is worth visiting or taking in. I know that for myself, like when I got to Simon Fraser, and I'd been teaching since my undergrad, but I mean, I wasn't good at it. And so I got to Simon Fraser and I'm like doing my PhD, and they're like, here's this class that you're going to teach. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to go about doing this. And so, it was just about like taking a lot of like teaching classes on my own time, like in evenings and weekends, on top of the PhD course load, just to be able to get that skill set. And so I know that it's hard sometimes to be able to dedicate that time when you're really busy, but it also is very worth it. For example, like I was just going to say the one grant that I work on with Chautauqua View Extended Care Home Nursing Home. That one is actually a grant for seniors. That one has nothing to do with art, but they framed it through an arts lens. So that's maybe one example of different ways to think creatively outside of the box. And then what I like to do in my practice, but this is also because I have training as a grant writer, is I like to do a collaborative grant process. So right from the beginning, with whoever it is that wants to partner with me or who I'm looking to partner with, we have right from brainstorming all the way to being co-applicants on that digital file, where we can both go in and we can work together to make changes and to write and to add information and details from both perspectives. And I think that also helps to make a more robust grant application as well, because you're hearing from multiple different voices. It's the same thing as publishing in academia these days. We don't really do it on our own because most places won't publish you on your own, because how can you say that you have a rounded perspective on this one topic as just one person writing from one perspective? So I think that that's maybe something to take into consideration when you're thinking about bringing an artist into your organization in some way, is having that collaborative grant writing approach too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think like partnerships is also one of those themes that kind of like, regardless of the topic that we have in this Growing Nonprofit series, but like we need to support each other because the challenges are real and difficult and complex. And so the more that we can kind of partner and build that collective momentum at the community level, the better. And so I think this this conversation has really shown the importance of that collaboration, getting involved, that I suppose active citizenship at the community level, so that we're informed and aware and in community with artists and others that are supporting our community members, right? And I just want to say, like, also the engagement with our, like, all levels of government, right? So that if arts is really important to you, making sure that that is shared, because that's kind of our role, I think, as engaged citizens, to advocate for the arts as well, whether or not we're artists or just community members, right? Like, the importance of this work cannot be understated, I think. So, but I suppose
Also, can I just add one more thing?
please.
Just about that, which I totally forgot to mention, is that a lot of the First Nations are always willing to support initiatives that involve artists and community. So if you're wanting to reach out to the Indigenous communities to do projects that are geared towards social change or advocacy, reach out to the First Nations as well.
And they often already have that money, right? And they don't have to go through
Exactly.
that funding process. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, I think a lot of people will set up barriers for themselves, thinking that they can only access funding from certain areas. But really, it's about learning who's out there, what their values are, if they align with yours, and just having a conversation.
No,
Absolutely.
excellent point. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, perhaps I'll just like allow anyone who wants to hop on and ask a question or make a comment or leave something in the chat, but perhaps just give kind of a last word to each of our panelists today. And yeah, I don't want to have the last word. I'd love for you all to end it, because you're the experts in your space. So just hop on the mic if you'd like to share kind of a last word.
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you for inviting me. I'm always really grateful to share Digital Matriarchs. Like I said, it's a project that's been very near and dear to my heart, continues to serve people to this day. And we completed it a year ago. I would really love to bring this project to Saskatchewan somehow, through all the conversations that I've had in various different levels of art, in organizations, nonprofit. All the conversations are very relatable to what we did, so it would be really amazing to be able to do that here. And yeah, I think that's about it. If anybody has any interest in reaching out to me, you can find me on the Digital Matriarchs website or lynn's@amatocreatives.com.
And I'll just add that I think that it's really heartwarming to be able to see how many people were here for this session. I'm really happy to see that people are interested in doing this collaborative type work. And interested in finding out what that entails, because it's not really something that you just like jump into. Like you kind of got to be connected. Like you got to like know people and know where to find the funds and, you know, that all that sort of stuff. And so I think that just loops back again to my like sort of guiding principles of respect, relationship, and responsibility. I'll pass it off to Em.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add other than just a thank you for making the space to have the conversation, and that yeah, again, yeah, it's not something that's always straightforward, and appreciate seeing all the folks here today that are interested in hearing about building relationships with artists and how that works. And I especially appreciate the shout out, Colleen, about arts advocacy. And if you believe in art and that it makes a difference in your lives and it makes you know, your life better, to be vocal about that and to support the arts. So yeah, definitely always something. And yeah, again, I'll throw my contact information there too in the chat. And if anybody's interested in kind of furthering the conversation or reaching out or that sort of thing, like always happy to connect.
No, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for your time today. And I do need to mention the South Sask Community Foundation because of our partnership with them to offer the Growing Nonprofit Series, we are also able to compensate our panel members. So that's really important. That was kind of something that came up a lot in this conversation. So we're really grateful to the South Sask for their commitment to supporting charities and nonprofit organizations in Southern Saskatchewan. And yeah, I think that we'll stay on maybe for 5 more minutes because we're just under our time. So if anyone does want to like ask any questions, I know sometimes it can be hard in the larger group. So we'll hang out here for a couple more minutes. Thanks for coming, Catherine. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or kind of ideas for future sessions, I'm always open to hearing more, but thanks for sharing your time with us today.